"You'll never own this place," my brother says, with that kind of grin men wear when they think the world finally agrees with them. The morning is so clean you can taste the sap in the air. The grass is still wet enough to darken our boots. He says it again, softer, like a promise. Never. The word hangs over the gravel drive like a low cloud that refuses to move. I don't answer. I let the small sounds do the talking wind against the silver birch, a loose tin panel ticking on the tractor shed, the realtor's pen clicking as he pretends to read the contract he's already memorized. A mockingbird lifts off the fence post, thin wings skimming the line where our father's fields turn to the neighbor's hay. The bird is the only one with any sense. It sees the scene for what it is, a patch of earth, two aging men, and a story that repeats when people stop listening. I watch my brother smile more than his eyes. Smiles tell you what a man believes about himself. Eyes tell you what he's hiding from himself. In his smile, I see a boy still too proud of winning the small game, the kind that ends before anyone counts the losses. In his eyes, nothing. No room for doubt, no echo of our father's voice, no memory of the winter I shoveled the barn roof at midnight so the beams wouldn't snap. He wears a shirt with pearl snaps and a cologne that doesn't belong to the morning. The smell is sharp enough to cut through the old cedar in the porch steps our father's cedar, playing by his hands, sanded with my patience, oiled every autumn I could remember. The realtor shuffles papers without meeting my face. He shouldn't. My face is plain, weathered, nothing to be afraid of. It's the silence that troubles him, because it stretches and makes room for all the things he knows and doesn't want to say. I know his type. Brisk voice, soft hands, calendar full of closings and lunches. He calls my brother by his first name too often, like repetition can make loyalty. There's a sign by the road, "For sale," white letters, blue frame. It stands where my father once hammered a stake to mark the place a fence would turn. He taught me to run a line with a mason's string so tight it sang when you plucked it. "A wall won't argue with you if the string doesn't budge," he'd say. I think about that while the realtor points to lines on a page that say, in the language of strangers, that what was ours now is business. My name isn't on those lines. That part has been arranged, cleaned of me like a stain in a shirt that a nephew claims and wears like something new. It didn't happen in a day. It happened in missed calls and side conversations, in late night promises made where I wasn't invited to sit. My brother's voice traveled without me, and when it arrived at the courthouse, it came dressed like a decision. "You had your chance," my brother says, as if chances are assigned by season. He walks the porch with the kind of confidence that comes from believing the roof will always hold under him. He forgets who patched the underlayment, who replaced the flashing, who learned the rhythm of the nail gun so the shingles lay down like obedient soldiers. Strong is a word that can turn on a man when he forgets what strength looks like after the applause. I don't give him the argument he wants. He needs me loud so he can be louder. Men like him win contests they've invented, and then parade the trophy through an empty town, waving at windows no one stands behind. I sip the coffee in my thermos. It's gone tepid, but it still tastes like what it always tastes like, black, honest, necessary. The lid clicks. The sound feels like the only signature I owe today. Memory finds me the way it always does, not in grand scenes, but in stubborn little details. My father's wrist, sinewed, turning the pipe wrench, the half-moons of dirt under his nails, the way he would nod once, small and certain, when a board sat right. Once, after we set the sill, he put the level on it and didn't speak for a full minute, bubble-centered, the tool quiet in our hands. "There," he said finally. "Now the house knows which way is true." I suppose that's how I learned to talk less and listen to the angle. The realtor starts to explain the timelines. A paper word for a rush my brother calls momentum. He uses phrases like market conditions and buyer appetite. Appetite is a curious thing to bring to land. The soil never ate anyone. It just opens for seed and keeps what is buried. My father is in this ground in all the ways a man can be and still be gone. I don't need a headstone to find him. I only need to stand where the water runs after a hard rain. "I told you," my brother says, leaning on the railing. He wants the scene to end with my back turned, the truck door slamming, my tires kicking up a little insult of dust. He wants to watch me leave, so he can leave this place easier. But I don't leave. I bend and flick a flake of paint from the porch column. I run my thumb over the grain and feel the soft lift where weather found a weakness and made a path. Wood tells the truth. It doesn't care who owns it on paper. Inside the house, there's a hallway that runs cool even in summer. The floorboards there are narrow and loud, but the sound is not anger. It's an old instrument reminding you it still plays. My mother used to hum as she wiped the baseboards, low and steady, never rushing, as if the work and the singing were the same thing. On winter mornings, you could smell coffee and cold iron. On spring ones, you could taste dust and lilac. Place isn't romance, it's repetition. My brother talks money like a man listing destinations he's never visited. He speaks in wide strokes: new truck, a vacation he says he's always owed his wife, another lot closer to town. He taps the contract with one finger, and I watch the paper sag. A small cave formed by the weight of ignorance. I don't pity him. Pity is a disservice to a man determined to be blind. I only watch and keep breathing because breath is the most durable tool a patient man owns. I know things he forgets I know. I know the inspector who found the hairline crack in the slab last spring and wondered aloud, in an empty room, whether the drainage on the north side had ever been fixed. I know which neighbor has been late on taxes 3 years running, and how a debt leaves a door ajar even in families that lock everything. I know the bank manager who looked over my permits 20 years ago and said, "You set your post straight, Rich." The world is full of people who think nobody remembers their sentences. I do. I stack them like lumber in a dry shed, stickered and waiting, ready for use. The realtor asks if I have any questions. I tell him no. The question I have can't be asked here. It isn't, "How did this happen?" I already know. It isn't, "Why?" A man's hunger is not a mystery. It's a schedule. The only question that matters is, where does it end? And the answer to that is simple. It ends where the line is true. I walk down to the edge of the field where the ground slopes into a shallow run. The soil is darker here, richer. My boots sink a fraction, then settle. A breeze lifts and sets down again. When I look back, my brother is laughing with the realtor, head thrown, mouth open. The sound doesn't travel all the way to me. It breaks apart and falls into the grass. A laugh is a fragile thing when there is work to be done. On the road, a truck passes slow, and in the glare of its windshield I see myself reflected older. Yes, but not spent. The reflection is brief. A pane of light sliding over me like a hand. I think of the first time I signed my own name on a deed. The weight of the pen, the cool desk under my forearm. Ownership is not a shout, it's a steady hand. Paper is a door. A man can step through it without making a sound. I pick up a flyer from the box under the for sale sign and fold it twice. Crisp corners. The map on the back shows the lot lines as a neat rectangle, as if wind and water don't argue, as if roots don't complicate intentions. I put the paper in my coat pocket and pat it once. It makes the smallest noise, like the start of a ledger line. When I return to the porch, my brother has run out of things to say and is filling the space with the only trick he knows, repeating what he thinks is true. I let him. I let the morning hold all of it. The talk, the paper, the old wood. There are days a man needs to spend like this, standing in the place where he learned the difference between force and leverage. I turn toward my truck. The key is warm from my pocket, metal stamped with a number that means nothing to the engine except begin. Behind me, laughter rises once more. It sounds thinner now, like it's traveling farther than it was meant to go. I don't look back. I don't need to. The land already knows I heard everything. There are lines to pull, stakes to set, quiet conversations to have where signatures stay. The next time I stand here, I won't need a word. The ground will speak for me. The porch creaks when I step down from it. The wood giving that tired sigh it always gave when my father carried feed sacks on his shoulder. I pause halfway, hand on the post, thumb running the worn edge where the paint chipped long ago. My brother doesn't notice. He's too busy talking about numbers, the kind that only look right when you don't count the costs. The realtor laughs politely, but his eyes flicker to me as though he wants to ask something he doesn't have the courage for. I meet his glance only briefly. A man in his trade knows when silence is heavier than protest. He returns to his clipboard, shifting papers that don't hold the weight of memory, just ink. I hear my brother's boots behind me scuffing on the porch boards. "You're wasting your time, Rich," he calls, loud enough for the realtor to catch it, soft enough to pretend he was joking if I turned back. I don't. My hand leaves the post and I walk to the truck. Gravel crunches slow beneath my steps, each stone a voice that doesn't need to be raised. The air smells like oil and lilac, a strange marriage of seasons and work. Spring has come, but the engine in my truck carries the scent of years. I lean against the driver's door and let my hand rest on the metal, still cool from the shade. The sound of my brother's laughter drifts again, thinner than it was an hour ago, as if it knows its days are numbered. I remember when laughter here sounded different. My father's laugh was short, controlled, rarely let out in full. But when it came, it held a kind of authority. like he was granting permission for joy, not just stumbling into it. He laughed once, long ago, when my brother knocked over a fence post trying to prove he could run the auger by himself. The machine bucked, the earth spat dirt, and my brother cursed like a man twice his age. Father just chuckled and said, "Tools don't respect pride, son, only patience." Patience. That word follows me into the cab of the truck. The seat remembers my shape, springs bending to the same curve they always do. I sit, but I don't start the engine. Instead, I open the glove compartment and slide out a worn notebook. The cover is frayed at the edges, soft like old leather. Inside, names, dates, small maps, nothing loud, nothing rushed. Just years of watching where things move when men aren't paying attention. I've written down debts no one thought mattered. A roof I helped mend in exchange for nothing more than a thank you. A field I plowed one spring because my neighbor's back gave out. A bank manager who once told me he trusted my judgment more than the paper he pushed across the desk. These little things live in ink because memory alone can be stolen, erased, or mocked. But paper, even simple line paper, keeps its own truth. The realtor's voice carries faintly now. He's explaining contingencies, conditions, words that make something sound official, even when it's just a dressed-up gamble. My brother interrupts, cuts across him, eager to show off what he thinks he understands. That has always been his way, louder, faster, sure that the noise itself proves the point. I write a single line in the notebook. He believes it is finished. Then I close it, place it back in the glove compartment, and rest my hand on the steering wheel. The barn leans in the rearview mirror, its roof line still scarred from the storm years ago. I remember climbing that ladder in sleet, hammer cold in my hands, nailing shingles while my brother stayed inside, saying he'd call someone if it got worse. He never did. Father watched from the kitchen window, and though he didn't say it, I saw the nod when I came down wet and shivering, the roof patched enough to hold. Some approvals are never spoken. They live in the silence. My brother doesn't know that silence can be a ledger too. Every slight, every dismissal, every theft written in invisible ink. He thinks silence is surrender. He doesn't understand that silence has teeth. I start the engine finally, letting the old motor grumble to life. Its sound is low, steady, nothing flashy like me. My brother waves an arm as though my leaving is the punchline he wanted. He says something I don't catch, but the cadence tells me it's another joke. He laughs at his own words. I don't laugh. The truck rolls down the drive, past the sign hammered into the earth. I slow when I reach it, roll the window down, and let my fingers brush the edge of the stake. It's just wood, thin, replaceable. My father's stakes were thicker, sharpened by hand, driven deep enough to stay through storms. This one wobbles under my touch. I smile faintly, not out of humor, but recognition. Weak foundations always give. At the crossroads, I stop and watch the dust settle. The sun is tilting now, long shadows stretching across the fields like reminders that every day closes, no matter how loud it began. I picture my brother standing on that porch, puffed up with victory. I picture him holding paper that names him as owner. And I picture the realtor's hand one day sliding a different paper across a different desk, my name at the top. That thought steadies me. It's not triumph, I feel it's inevitability. The kind that moves slower than pride but lasts longer than laughter. I press the accelerator and the truck pulls forward. The road is rough, ruts from last winter still unfilled, but the wheels know the path. Every bump reminds me, land remembers. It remembers who walked it, who worked it, who let it rest when it needed rest. Paper can be forged, memory cannot. At the far bend, I glance back once more. The roof glints in the light, the fields sway in the breeze, and the sign stands crooked, waiting. It will not wait long. I drive on, the sound of gravel fading, notebook heavy in the glove box. In time, that weight will shift from paper to deed, from silence to statement. For now, I let the silence do what it does best, prepare the ground. And as I reach the highway, I whisper only once, low enough for no one but the wheel to hear. Never is a word you should never use. The past doesn't come all at once. It seeps in through smells, through sounds, through the feel of tools in your hand that remember your grip better than most people do. I wake early the next morning, not because I have anywhere to be, but because years of habit don't wash out easy. Dawn has its own rhythm, and I've lived too long inside of it to ignore it now. The kettle hisses. The coffee turns black in the cup, and I sit at the kitchen table with my back to the window, letting the light come to me instead of chasing it. The notebook lies open beside me. Its pages are quiet companions, crooked lines from nights I couldn't sleep, Ink faded where the pen scratched dry. They're not confessions, not even plans, just memory, stacked like firewood. And the memories go back farther than my brother wants anyone to recall. I was 21 the first time I thought of the land as something more than just dirt underfoot. Father was sick that winter, his lungs rattling like loose nails in a bucket. Snow had drifted against the barn doors, thick enough to bury a man if he wasn't careful. My brother stayed inside, said the cold made his chest ache. I pulled on Father's old coat, sleeves too short, and shoveled until the hinges screamed open. The cattle needed feeding. Sickness didn't cancel hunger. That night, I sat by Father's bed. He was awake enough to whisper, "You kept the doors open." Just that. A sentence so simple most men wouldn't remember it. But I did. Because it was the only time he ever admitted needing me. That barn is still standing today. Not because of luck, because of work. My brother never tells that story when he talks about the land. He prefers the story where he managed the feed costs, or where he arranged to buy new stock. He tells it like he was the architect, while I was just the hired hand. The house itself carries my hours in its bones. I sanded every floorboard in the west wing, hand-cramped, sweat dripping onto oak that drank it without thanks. I patched plaster until my arms trembled, mixed mortar by hand when the mixer broke, painted ceilings until my neck felt like a knot. I remember the winter I stripped shingles off the roof one by one, fingers cracked, wind cutting sharp enough to sting tears into my eyes. My brother drove by once that week, honked his horn like encouragement, then left. He told people later that he took care of the roof. I let him say it. Words are cheap. Nails aren't. Sacrifice doesn't always look like suffering. Sometimes it looks like staying late when no one asks. Sometimes it looks like signing your name on the co-op loan so your brother doesn't have to risk his credit. Sometimes it looks like skipping your own needs so a roof beam can be bought, or an acre can be cleared. I did all of that and more, quietly. Not because I wanted thanks, but because I believe land and family were the same thing. You tend them both, or they wither. But years pass, and memories rot when no one tends them. People forget who swung the hammer, who laid the brick. They remember who spoke the loudest about it afterward. I still see the night Father died. The house smelled of iron and candle wax. My brother stood in the hallway, pacing, already speaking about arrangements. I sat by the old man, holding his hand, listening to his last breaths, drag like rough boards pulled across gravel. When his chest finally stopped, the silence was heavier than grief. It was the sound of responsibility being handed down, without ceremony. But my brother never shouldered it. He turned responsibility into negotiation, family into transaction. And I let him, for too long. Because I thought silence would be honored, the way Father honored it. I thought patience would speak for itself. I was wrong. The land doesn't forget, though. Each furrow cut into the field holds the memory of hands. The apple orchard still leans toward the sun the way I trained it. The stone wall I rebuilt after the flood still stands, lichen softening its edges. I know the work is there. I can see it in the way grass grows straight on the ridges I graded. I can hear it in the echo of boards I nailed down. Even if people erase my name from paper, the place itself remembers. That is the thing my brother doesn't understand. Ownership isn't just in deeds and signatures. It's in calluses, in scars, in the sound of a hammer that hits straight every time. The coffee goes cold before I realize I've drained the cup. I set it down, listening to the clink, and let the silence stretch. Sacrifice is invisible until it isn't. And one day soon, he will see all of it lined up in front of him. Years he dismissed, hours he laughed at, the quiet foundation he pretended was his. I close the notebook, slide it back into its drawer, and glance out the window. The morning is brighter now, shadows sharp across the yard. Work waits for me elsewhere, but the land, our land, still tugs at me. And somewhere across town, my brother is laughing at his new deal, certain he's won. He doesn't know the years he forgot are already working against him. Because time, like silence, always comes back around. The notebook comes with me everywhere now. It isn't thick no more than 100 pages, but every line carries something my brother would call worthless. He doesn't understand the weight of small things. He's built his life on showpieces, while mine has been kept alive by details no one else bothers to write down. I leaf through the entries one evening as the sun burns down behind the grain silos. The light turns the paper gold, making the ink look deeper, more permanent. There's the winter I shoveled the barn roof alone, the spring I lent him seed money without asking for a cent back, the summer I ran fence in 100-degree heat because he was negotiating at the diner. Each page is quiet proof. Each mark says, I was there. My brother has always needed an audience. Even when we were boys, he wouldn't climb the oak tree unless someone was watching. I climbed it in the rain, alone, just to see how far the branches stretched. He told the story later like it was his. That was his gift, taking silence and filling it with his own voice. Father knew. He didn't say it outright, but he knew. Once, after a long day, he set a hand on my shoulder and said, "Some men measure their lives by the noise they make, others by the lines they keep straight." He didn't have to explain which he thought I was. Through the years, I watched my brother turn every sacrifice into his advantage. When I paid off the back taxes one season, he told the neighbors he had handled the county. When I fixed the irrigation lines in the dead of night, he bragged about managing the water problem. When I mortgaged my truck to cover the loan for new cattle, he stood in church the next Sunday and thanked God for his ability to provide. And I let him, not because I was weak, but because I thought family meant letting pride be shared. I thought my quiet would protect us both. But silence only protects men who don't betray it. I remember the day he first spoke about selling. We were standing by the pasture fence, watching the herd nose down into the grass. The air smelled like dust and clover. He leaned on the rail, arms folded, and said casually, "We could get good money for this place. Better than what it gives us now." I stared at him. The fence between us felt thicker than wood. "This land isn't a stock to be traded," I told him. He laughed. That laugh again, sharp and hollow. "Everything's a stock, Rich. You just don't like to admit it." I didn't argue. I rarely do. But I felt something shift that day, like a fault line groaning beneath our boots. He had said out loud what I always feared, that he never saw the place as inheritance, only as currency. I think about that conversation often when I walk past the stone wall I rebuilt after the flood. Every rock carried in by hand, stacked with patience, leveled with care. The wall doesn't move. It doesn't need applause to hold. It just exists, stronger because of silence. That's what sacrifice is. But sacrifice alone won't save what's mine. I've learned that. Patience must eventually sharpen. Silence must eventually cut. I remember the day I co-signed the loan for him, back when we still called ourselves partners. He came to me desperate, eyes bright with the fear of losing face. He promised he'd pay me back, promised I'd have nothing to worry about. I signed anyway, because a man's word should be enough when he shares your blood. He never mentioned that loan again. He paid it off eventually, but when he told the story later, it was his triumph, his clever deal-making. My name was scrubbed out as neatly as a pencil line erased from a ledger. I didn't fight him on it, but I wrote it down. And it sits in the notebook now, a reminder that my silence has always been recorded, even if he didn't hear it. The town remembers too, though it never says so loudly. The banker still shakes my hand longer than most, because he knows who saved the barn from foreclosure in 2092. The neighbor still nods respectfully when I pass, because he remembers whose tractor pulled his wife out of the ditch that icy January. These small acknowledgments collect like coins in a jar. Quiet wealth, invisible to my brother, but not to me. He thinks the Realtor's paper is the end of the story. He doesn't see the ledger I keep, the one built on memory, patience, and sacrifice. The one that doesn't vanish when a laugh echoes across a porch. That night, I sit on the porch of my own modest house, the notebook on my lap, listening to crickets in the grass. The air is cooler now, the kind that carries a whisper of autumn. I can almost hear Father's voice in the breeze, that steady tone that never needed to shout. "You keep the line true," I imagine him saying. "Doesn't matter if anyone sees you said it. The house will know." The house, the land, even the silence, they all know. And so does the ledger. I close the notebook and set it aside. The stars above are sharp, unblinking, like eyes that have seen this story before. Family turned to business, sacrifice turned to mockery. I lean back in the chair and let the weight of it settle. Patience is not weakness. Sacrifice is not surrender. They are investments, quiet ones. And investments, when kept long enough, always return. The night air smells faintly of cut hay. I breathe it deep and let it stay with me. My brother believes he's taken everything, but he's only borrowed. And the debt is already accruing interest. Betrayal rarely comes as thunder. It comes with the steady scratching of a pen. The day of the sale was warmer than it should have been for early spring. The courthouse smelled of dust and paper, a mix that clung to the walls like mold. I sat in the back of the room, not invited, not expected, but there anyway. A man has the right to watch his own history be written, even if his name is absent from the page. My brother arrived in his best boots, polished until the leather looked more like glass than hide. He wore a suit too tight at the shoulders, but he liked it that way. It made him stand straighter, made him feel larger. He carried his voice the way some men carry knives, visible, gleaming, meant to remind everyone of its edge. The realtor followed close, smiling, eager to close another deal. The banker was already waiting, tapping his pen, ready to press it into my brother's hand like a blessing. I remember the echo in that room. High ceiling, old plaster, wood floors that groaned beneath every step. Father had walked those floors once when he signed the first deed. I had been a boy, holding mother's hand, staring up at the way light filtered through tall windows. Back then, paper meant permanence. Now it felt like erasure. The clerk called names, shuffled documents, spoke in that official monotone that empties meaning from words. My brother grinned, leaned forward, slapped his palm down on the table, as if buying a round at the bar. "You'll never own this place," he had said days earlier with that laugh. And now, here he was, proving it in ink. The pen scratched. The sound cut deeper than any insult. Paper slid, initials scrawled. The whole thing took less than 15 minutes. 15 minutes to undo decades. The realtor's smile widened as he stacked the signed forms. "Congratulations," he said, his tone oily with practiced cheer. My brother chuckled, broad and triumphant. He looked over his shoulder as if searching for me. When his eyes landed on me in the back row, his grin grew sharper. "Guess it's official," he called across the room, breaking decorum without caring. "All mine now. Can't say I didn't warn you, Rich." The room chuckled lightly. Even the clerk allowed a smirk. My brother had always known how to gather a laugh when he wanted one. I didn't respond. My silence made him uncomfortable, though he tried to wear it like victory. He turned back to the table, pretending I didn't exist. But I saw the tremor in his hand when he picked up the deed. Just a flicker. Pride is loud, but nerves are louder in the right light. Memory hit me then, sharper than the scratch of that pen. I saw the night I dug out the drainage ditch in the north field, water up to my knees, rain hammering down. My brother never showed. He claimed he had meetings. I kept digging until the flood receded. Without that ditch, the field would have drowned. Without that field, the loan would have defaulted. Without that loan, there would have been nothing left to sell today. But none of that lived on the paper in his hands. The realtor closed the folder and shook my brother's hand. Then the banker's. The transaction was done. My brother slapped his chest like a man staking a claim in gold. He raised his voice once more, ensuring the whole room heard. Finally mine, and no one else's. The word mine echoed too long in that old courthouse, like it wasn't sure if it belonged there. I rose slowly, chair legs scraping against wood, the sound louder than I expected. Heads turned, curious. I walked past the table where they sat, where my brother beamed and the realtor shuffled papers. My boots thudded against the floorboards. The air felt thick, heavy, with dust motes that spun in the light. I didn't look at my brother. I didn't need to. His victory was small, shallow, born from paper and arrogance. Mine would come from something deeper, something he couldn't imagine. I paused only once, hand on the courthouse door, and let my palm rest against its old oak frame. How many hands had pushed this door before mine? How many men had left here believing ink made them untouchable? The wood was warm from the sun, smoother than it looked. I pressed a little harder, let the grain speak to me. Then I opened it and stepped into the daylight. Outside, the air tasted of spring dust, dry and restless. People passed without looking. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The world moved on, indifferent to betrayal. But I didn't move on. I carried the sound of that pen with me. The image of my brother's grin burned sharp. Betrayal isn't forgotten. It is cataloged, filed, preserved. And like any ledger, it waits for balance. That night, I sat again at my table, notebook open, pen poised. The page was blank, waiting. I wrote one line in steady script. "The land is gone for now." I closed the cover and slid it aside. My hands folded on the table, rough, scarred, still steady. My brother had taken the paper, but he had not taken the silence. And silence, when kept long enough, becomes the sharpest blade. Humiliation doesn't always sting in the moment. Sometimes it seeps in later, like damp in the walls, until the whole place smells of rot. A week after the courthouse signing, I walked into Miller's Cafe, same as I had every Saturday morning for 30 years. The place smelled of burnt coffee and fried bacon grease that never really leaves the griddle. The bell above the door gave its thin jingle. Folks nodded, some lifted a hand, quiet gestures that mean more in a small town than any loud greeting. But at the back table, his table now, my brother held court. He had his boots kicked out, chair leaned back just enough to look casual, not enough to risk tipping. A circle of men sat around him. The banker, the realtor, two cousins who always followed the loudest voice. My brother was retelling the courthouse scene, drawing laughter with every detail. And there he was, sitting in the back like some lost puppy. Wouldn't even open his mouth. I told him plain he'd never own it. And what did he do? Nothing. Just stared, like he was already beaten. Laughter rolled around the table, shallow but sharp. The realtor laughed hardest. His kind always does laughter bought cheap to keep business steady. My brother slapped the table, relishing the sound. I stood at the counter, ordered my coffee, black. The waitress gave me a look, soft in the eyes like she wished she could say something. She didn't. In towns like ours, silence is safer. I sat at the corner booth, notebook in my jacket, and listened. The sound of his voice carried easily. He was painting me as a relic, a man out of his time, weak, slow, irrelevant. He said it with the confidence of someone convinced the world belonged to him now. "He's got nothing left," he said, grinning wide, eyes glinting. "The land's mine, the deed's mine. All he's got is his old truck and that crumbling shack he calls a house." The cousins laughed, not because it was funny, but because they needed to. Men like them cling to the strongest laugh in the room, even if it cuts blood. I lifted my coffee, sipped, bitter, hot, familiar. My face didn't change. Not then. But inside, I felt something shift like a steel cable pulled tight, ready to snap back when the time was right. Memory slid in, uninvited. I saw the nights I worked double shifts on the county crew, patching asphalt until my hands blistered, only to come home and fix fence by lantern light. I saw the storm of 2089, when I stood knee-deep in floodwater saving the lower fields, while my brother was drinking beer at the VFW. I remembered all of it, because all of it lived in my hands. He mocked them now, these hands, as if they'd built nothing. But the land knew, and I knew. The banker leaned forward, chuckling. "You sure got the better end of the deal, Tom," he said. My brother grinned wider. "Better end? I got the whole damn thing. Rich never had the stomach for business. He thinks sweat is ownership. Paper's what counts, and I've got the paper." The men nodded, the way men do when they don't want to be left out of the winning side. I swallowed the last of my coffee, set the cup down soft. The clink of porcelain was small, but it cut through the laughter for half a second. Heads turned my way. My brother's smile faltered just a fraction before he forced it wider. "Speak of the devil," he said. "Rich, you want to join us? Tell your side of the story?" I looked at him for the first time. Really looked. His cheeks flushed, pride puffed, hands restless on the table. He wanted me loud. He wanted me angry, broken open, spilling hurt where he and his men could lap it up. But I gave him nothing. Just the stillness of eyes that have seen storms and waited them out. "No," I said finally, voice low, even. "You've already told it." The table laughed again, uneasy this time. My brother forced another smirk, waved his hand as if dismissing me. "See? Nothing left to say." I left coins on the counter, walked out. The bell above the door jingled, same as when I'd entered, but now it sounded like a reminder, not of defeat of debt. Outside, the morning air smelled of manure and lilac again, a strange mix that reminded me of spring chores. The sun was climbing higher, casting long, sharp shadows across Main Street. My truck waited, steady as ever. I climbed in, gripped the wheel, and sat for a long while before starting the engine. Mockery is cheap. It buys a man a laugh in a cafe, maybe a nod in the street, but it doesn't last. Laughter fades. Silence lingers. I wrote one line in the notebook that night. He believes the story is over. Then I closed the book, slid it under my hand, and let the weight of it remind me. Stories don't end with laughter. They end with balance. And balance always comes. Revenge doesn't begin with fire. It begins with paper. After the courthouse, after the cafe, after the laughter had worn itself out, I went back to the old habit Father taught me. Walk the perimeter. Not of the land anymore that was gone on paper, but of my own resolve. Walking clears a man's mind, sets lines straight where the world has twisted them. The ground was soft that evening, spring moisture still clinging underfoot. Frogs croaked from the ditch, and a single owl called from the tree line. I walked slow, steady, breathing the way you do when you want silence to answer. By the time I reached the back porch, I knew the first step. The bank still knew my name. Not the way my brother thought he knew it in jokes and dismissals, but in signatures, and repayments never missed. I drove there the next morning, truck rattling down streets lined with blooming dogwoods. The same manager who once told me I set posts straight shook my hand with both of his, long and firm. He asked how I was holding up, voice cautious, careful. I told him I was fine. That was all. I didn't mention the betrayal. Didn't mention the laughter. Just asked, casual as weather talk, if any small lots had come up at auction recently. Vacant parcels, foreclosures, anything overlooked. His eyes flickered, and I knew then what I had always known. Banks remember. He slid me a folder. Nothing fancy, he said, but steady ground. Cheap. I nodded. That was all I needed. Steady ground. By summer, I held 2 deeds in my drawer. Small parcels, both worthless to men like my brother. One was an old mechanic's shop by the highway. The other a weedy patch on the edge of town where the soil was too poor for crops. But paper doesn't laugh. Paper accumulates. Each evening, I opened the notebook and copied the deed numbers into its back pages. The ledger was growing, quiet but certain. My brother never noticed. He was busy throwing barbecues at the old place, boasting about his land. He invited half the town, posed by the barn like a man in a magazine spread. I didn't attend, but I heard the stories how he strutted, how he raised his glass and said, "To the future," as if the past had been erased. The realtor was there, smiling, whispering promises of more deals. My brother called him partner that night. I wrote that down too. Meanwhile, I spent my time differently. I walked the edges of town, speaking with tenants, shopkeepers, anyone with something to lose. I asked questions most men didn't bother with. How's the rent treating you? Any trouble with repairs? Landlord's been slow to answer. And I listened. Just listened. You'd be surprised what people confess when no one interrupts. That's when I learned the truth I already suspected. My brother was careless. He saw property as trophies, not obligations. Tenants waited months for leaky roofs to be fixed. A widow nearly lost her shop when he forgot to file a tax form. The mechanic's kid told me he still hadn't replaced a busted heater, even after 2 winters. I didn't lecture. I didn't gloat. I just wrote every detail, neat lines in the ledger. At night, sitting under the yellow lamp, I'd reread the pages. The notebook was no longer just memory, it was blueprint. Sacrifice had laid the foundation, betrayal had carved the wound, and now the counterweight was taking shape. My brother thought he had silenced me. What he didn't understand was that silence isn't absence. Silence is gathering. I made another visit to the bank. Another nod, another folder. This one heavier. Inside, records of missed payments, not mine, never mine, but others. My brother's name started appearing in margins. Small at first, then more frequent. Delays, extensions, excuses. His laugh couldn't pay bills, and the paper didn't care how loud he'd been at the cafe. I closed the folder gently, thanked the manager, and left. The sun outside felt different that day. Sharper, like it was cutting shadows into clearer shapes. I didn't tell a soul. Not the neighbors who complained, not the tenants who cursed his name, not even the waitress at Miller's Cafe who sometimes gave me a softer smile than she should. I kept it all close, the way father kept seed in his pocket ready for the right season. The counterweight was growing, quiet, unseen. And my brother, too loud to hear anything but his own voice, had no idea the silence was already turning against him. I wrote one line that night before closing the notebook. The ground shifts slow, but it shifts. Then I turned out the lamp and let the darkness settle. The realtor was the easiest piece to move. Not because he was weak, though he was, but because his kind always chases the louder pocket. He'd hitched himself to my brother's laugh, mistaking volume for permanence. But business doesn't worship pride. It worships consistency. And I've been consistent my whole life. I found him one afternoon at his office, blinds half closed against the glare. His tie was loose, collar damp. The desk was stacked with listings, some neat, some sloppy. He looked surprised when I stepped in, as though silence itself had walked through the door. "Rich," he said, rising half-heartedly, smile nervous. "Didn't expect." "No one does," I interrupted gently. He laughed once, brittle. I sat across from him, placed a manila folder on the desk. Inside, 3 small parcels. All mine. Bought quiet, paid in full, clean as rainwater. He flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing. "Didn't know you were in the market again." "That's the point," I said. His pen tapped the folder as though it might bleed numbers. He asked if I wanted to sell, flip, trade. I shook my head. "I'll hold," I said. "But I'll need management. Someone who knows how to handle tenants. Someone who values quiet work over loud promises." He understood the shape of the words even if he didn't admit it. Money talks in his own dialect, and mine was starting to sound steadier than my brother's. When I left his office, I could feel it. A crack in the facade, small but spreading. Meanwhile, my brother was busy building a reputation he couldn't maintain. He bought another property, an old duplex on the south side, bragged about it in the cafe, called himself landlord of half the town. But the tenants called me. They remembered who fixed their fences, who answered at midnight when pipes burst. They told me about unanswered calls, about mold creeping across their ceilings. I listened, wrote it down, every detail a line in the ledger. The second bank folder came to me by chance, or maybe by patience. Inside, overdue taxes, delayed insurance premiums, a late mortgage payment on the duplex. I studied the paper at my kitchen table under the lamp's yellow light. My brother was slipping, fast, but too loud to notice the ground was already soft beneath him. I didn't rush. Revenge doesn't hurry. I bought one more property instead, an empty storefront by the highway. Cheap, ignored, but visible. A place with windows that catch the sun. When the realtor drew up the papers, he didn't even blink at my name. He was used to writing it by then. Each time he did, the line grew heavier, thicker. My brother's laugh might echo across town, but on paper, my name was the one repeated. By autumn, I held 5 deeds. Small ones, quiet ones, but together they formed something my brother never understood. Leverage. Tenants spoke to me before they spoke to him. The realtor called me twice as often as he called him. And the bank well. The bank always listens to the man who never misses a payment. I stayed out of the cafe. Let him keep the stage. Let him drink from the shallow cup of attention. People laughed with him, but fewer now. Laughter grows thin when roofs still leak and heaters still break. One evening, I walked past the courthouse. The tall windows caught the dying light, same way they had the day he signed the deed. I stopped at the steps, stared at the door, let memory flicker. His grin, the scratch of the pen, the way the room chuckled at my silence. I smiled then, not out of humor, but out of certainty. Paper took from me once, but paper could also return. At home, I opened the notebook. Its pages were crowded now. Deeds, debts, details. A quiet story taking shape. I flipped to a blank sheet and wrote, "He believes laughter secures him, but paper secures me." I underlined it once. Slow, deliberate. Then I closed the book, let my hand rest on the cover, and breathed steady. The counterweight was nearly built. My brother thought I had nothing left but silence. He didn't know silence was already carrying his debt, his tenants, his realtor, his land. And soon enough, it would carry his pride. It always begins small. A missed call. A roof that leaks a little too long. A tenant who stops paying because no one fixed the furnace before winter. Tiny cracks, invisible at first, until the whole structure groaned. I heard it before my brother did. In fact, he never really heard it at all. Men who shout can't hear much beyond their own voices. The first whisper came from a tenant in the duplex. A young mother, 2 kids, husband laid off at the factory. I passed her at the post office, her eyes tired, her voice tight. "You know Tom?" she asked. I nodded. "Been trying to reach him about the mold in the back bedroom. Kids keep coughing. He won't answer." I didn't offer advice. I didn't promise a thing. Just listened, then tucked the detail away. That night, I wrote in the notebook, "Mold, South Duplex. Tenant losing patience." Soon there were more. The widow at the corner shop, the mechanic's boy, even the bartender at Miller's Cafe. They all had the same story. Calls unanswered, repairs ignored, promises stretched too thin. My brother wasn't neglectful out of malice. No, his kind is worse. He believed neglect wasn't real if he didn't look at it. As long as he had the laugh, the brag, the toast raised high, he thought the rest would take care of itself. But the world doesn't run on pride. It runs on details. And details were always my trade. By autumn, the realtor's calls to me had doubled. He tried to hide it, lowering his voice, speaking quickly, but I heard the edge of concern. Deals were slipping. Buyers hesitated when my brother's name appeared. Tenants whispered about moving out. Even the bank, quiet as it kept itself, began to tighten. The second folder from the manager was heavier than the first. Taxes behind. Insurance late. A notice from the county missed paperwork, fines stacking up. My brother's empire wasn't solid. It was scaffolding without braces. I read every line, steady as a carpenter with a level. Then I closed the folder and let it sit, heavy on the table. Paper had cut me once. Now it was cutting him. I heard the laughter change too. At Miller's Cafe, where once the whole table chuckled, now only a few joined in. The cousins still clapped him on the back, but the banker's smile was thinner. The realtor's eyes darted to the door. Even the waitress, polite as ever, set his plate down a little harder than before. Laughter that once rang like brass now sounded tinny, like coins falling into an empty jar. One night, driving home past the duplex, I saw a light flickering in the window. The young mother stood there, arms crossed, staring out like she'd been waiting for someone who never came. I slowed, almost stopped, but I didn't. It wasn't time yet. Revenge isn't about saving them. Not directly. It's about letting neglect reveal itself until everyone sees what you already knew. At home, under the lamp, I opened the notebook again. The pages were nearly full now, deeds, debts, names, moments. A story written in silence. I added a new line. His empire is hollow. The wind has started to whistle through it. I leaned back in the chair. Let the words sit. Outside, the wind did whistle, rattling the porch boards, bending the trees. It sounded like the land itself breathing. The cracks had formed. My brother didn't notice. He never would, until the day the whole thing collapsed under the weight of his laughter. And I would be there, not with a shout, but with a card. Quiet, certain, unavoidable. The first real crack came with the duplex. Word spread that the county had tagged it for inspection after complaints piled up: mold, broken plumbing, unsafe wiring. Tenants whispered about filing suit. My brother stormed through town, red-faced, calling it harassment. But paper doesn't care about a man's anger. Paper only cares about signatures, about dates missed and boxes left unchecked. I heard about it before he told me. Everyone did. That's the thing about cracks, they echo louder than walls built to hide them. The realtor called me late one evening, voice low, cautious. "Rich, you wouldn't happen to be interested in a duplex, would you?" I said nothing for a long moment, let silence stretch. He cleared his throat, filled it nervously. "Thing is, Tom's behind on taxes. The county's breathing down his neck. He's thinking of offloading." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "Maybe," I said. "Depends on the price." The realtor exhaled like he'd been holding his breath all week. Deals thrive on desperation, and my brother's name had become shorthand for it. At the cafe, his laugh was still there, but thinner, weaker, desperate for response. He banged the table harder, told stories louder, but the chuckles came late, scattered. Even the cousins hesitated before joining in, as if unsure which side of the fence to stand on. I sat in my corner booth, coffee in hand, notebook under my jacket. The waitress gave me a quiet nod. She'd noticed it too. The town was shifting, the air itself different. The bank manager met me with a longer handshake that week. His eyes, steady behind thick glasses, lingered on mine. He didn't have to say anything. The folder he slid across the desk spoke enough. More late payments. Insurance lapsed. A loan renewal denied. "Solid men still matter," he said quietly as I closed the folder. "Paper remembers." Inaudid. Paper remembers. So does silence. By winter, the duplex was mine. Bought through the same realtor who once laughed at my brother's jokes. Signed with the same pen my brother thought would erase me. I didn't gloat, didn't celebrate. Just folded the deed, placed it in the notebook, and wrote beneath it, "The house knows which way is true." The young mother stayed. I fixed the mold within a week, repaired the furnace before the first snow. She paid her rent on time after that, every month, without complaint. Word spread. Tenants began to drift my way, quietly, like water seeping through cracks. Meanwhile, my brother flailed louder. He cursed the county, cursed the tenants, cursed the realtor, cursed even the bank. But every curse was just another sign of hollowing. His voice carried but without weight, like a drum too thin to hold its own beat. The realtor called me more often than him now. The banker smiled more easily when my name came up. The cousins sat quieter at the cafe, unsure whether to laugh. And my brother, still blind, thought he was holding ground. He didn't see that the silence already owned him. One evening, I walked the perimeter again, not of land I lost, but of land returned. Snow crunched underfoot, cold biting sharp in my lungs. The duplex windows glowed warm behind me. Tenants laughed softly inside. That sound was sturdier than my brother's laugh had ever been. I stood in the cold, listening, notebook heavy in my coat pocket. When I flipped it open, the ink barely flowed in the chill, but it was enough to write one line. "The hollow has become a shell. Soon it will collapse." I shut the book, let the silence close around me, and smiled faintly. Because silence doesn't rush. Silence waits. And soon, even his laughter would have nowhere left to echo. The day it ended looked ordinary. No storms, no shouts, no slammed doors. Just the faint smell of cut grass on the wind and the sun spilling warm across the courthouse steps. The kind of day no one expects to change anything. That's how endings work, best quiet, unannounced. I had been called there by the realtor. His voice on the phone had been clipped, hurried. "Rich, if you want to be here, today's the day." That was all he said, but I already knew. Paper had been shifting for months. The hollow empire had caved in on itself, and now the collapse had reached the clerk's desk. My brother arrived first, dressed as if clothing could cover debt. Suit wrinkled, tie too bright, shoes scuffed from rushing. He carried a smile like a mask, plastered wide but slipping at the edges. His steps echoed sharp against the stone floor, but the sound was brittle. The realtor greeted him politely, not warmly. A difference my brother didn't notice, but I did. The air between them was thin. Professional now, no more backslapping, no more laughter. Just business. And business had moved on. I sat in the corner of the room, the same seat I'd taken when he'd gloated months before. Back then, he had raised his voice to mock me. This time, he didn't dare look in my direction. His eyes stayed on the papers, on the lines he no longer controlled. The clerk read through the file. The words were plain, final, foreclosure, repossession, sale transfer. My brother's empire reduced to paragraphs and signatures. The silence after each sentence was heavy enough to press against the ribs. He shifted in his seat, cleared his throat, tried to laugh once short, awkward, like a man choking on his own pride. No one joined him. Not the clerk, not the banker, not even the realtor. When it was done, the realtor stacked the papers, smoothed them flat, and reached into his jacket. He pulled out a business card, crisp, white, heavy stock. Without looking at me, he slid it across the table to my brother. "From the new owner," he said softly. My brother frowned, confused, then lifted the card. His lips moved as he read the name. My name. His hand froze. His eyes flicked up finally to where I sat in the back. Silence stretched between us, deeper than any word could travel. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just met his stare, steady, calm. For the first time, he couldn't fill the space with laughter. He couldn't speak at all. The card trembled slightly in his hand. The way a man trembles when the foundation beneath him is gone and he realizes too late it was never his. I stood, slow, deliberate. The chair scraped across the floor, echoing in the hollow room. My boots sounded steady, each step measured, until I stood near the door. I didn't say a word. Didn't need to. Silence had spoken for me. Paper had carried my voice. The card was louder than any laugh he had ever thrown at me. Outside, the day was still bright, the grass still smelled fresh, the town still moved as if nothing had happened. That was the beauty of it. Revenge, real revenge, doesn't come with trumpets. It comes like breath. Unnoticed, constant, undeniable. I reached into my pocket, touched the edge of my notebook, and let my hand rest there. The last line I would ever write waited for me at home. And as I walked down the courthouse steps, the only sound behind me was silence. The kind that follows a man who knows he's been beaten without a blow. At home that night, the lamp burned low. The notebook lay open before me, pages worn, corners curling from years of use. I turned through them slowly, one by one the lines of sacrifice, the records of betrayal, the quiet steps of patience, and finally, the deeds. Each page told a story my brother never wanted told. Each line proved that silence hadn't been surrender. It had been a ledger, and the balance had finally come due. I dipped the pen once more, the ink sluggish but steady. On the last blank page I wrote, "He laughed." I listened. Paper remembered. Silence answered. I set the pen down and closed the book with care. For the first time in years, it felt finished. Heavy, yes, but whole. The window beside me was cracked open to the night. Crickets sang in the grass, steady and unbothered. The air smelled of hay and cooling earth. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then quieted. Life went on, as it always does, indifferent to the small victories and humiliations of men. I leaned back in the chair, let the silence wrap around me. It wasn't empty silence anymore. It was full, thick, dignified. A silence that didn't ache, but settled. I thought of Father, his hand on my shoulder, his voice saying, "Keep the line true." I thought of the barn roof I'd saved, the stone wall I'd rebuilt, the tenants who now slept under roofs that didn't leak. All of it real, all of it lasting. And I thought of my brother sitting with that card in his hand, the laugh gone from his throat. He would never admit what it meant, never say aloud that silence had beaten him, but he would feel it. Every time he saw my name, every time the realtor looked past him and toward me, every time the land itself reminded him of the hands that had shaped it. That was enough, more than enough. I closed the notebook, slid it into the drawer, and turned out the lamp. The house settled around me, old wood creaking soft, like it was breathing with me. Revenge doesn't need noise, it doesn't need witnesses, it only needs to be complete. And as I sat there in the dark, I knew it was. The silence had spoken, and it would last longer than any laugh.